are looking and thinking about teacher professional learning so closely and so seriously. In fact, when I was leaving Ontario, I had to think of what I would put on my out-of-office notice, and I wrote there that I was away, because I'm away for a week. It's not a small amount of time to be away from my misrad. I said I'm away and I'm learning alongside teacher leaders. And really, that's how we felt it has been for us these 3 days of really learning with and from each other. So I thank you very much for your presentation. I learned a lot from it. I also really want to thank Karen Hayosmot for having us here. It's been a very exciting period of time for us. We've loved every minute. So I want to begin by saying that just as I was trying to struggle with what I could put in my out of office, I struggled a little bit with what I was going to call this presentation. You know, the title of a presentation is very important, and the first few minutes is huge. In Canada, I tell jokes, but now that I've been invited to many jurisdictions to tell jokes, I realize that my jokes don't work so well in different countries. So, for example, when I was in Ireland, I tried to tell a joke about a moose, which came out about a mouse. It really didn't work. So I'm not going to try and teach you or tell you my jokes. But I did think that what we would be looking at, innovation through teacher professional learning, and that these are some lessons that we can share about what we learned in our journey that may or may not be relevant. Sorry, I know it keeps going up and down, right? I will do my best. But I know that some things will be very relevant to you and some things will be not relevant. It's up and down, right? Yeah. Slicha. I think that as I was thinking about it, I realized that really one title for the presentation could have been Lessons in Love. And why Lessons in Love? Because I wanted to show you that when I was here in 2012, I was very lucky. I was invited to a conference at the Van Leer Institute. It was a conference that was looking at the tension between regulation and trust. And we were looking at 14 jurisdictions, what was happening in regulation in the education system and what was happening at the level of trust. Yediot Achronot came to talk with us, and they interviewed 4 teachers. 2 were actually administrators. One was 2 teachers, me, one of the teachers. And basically what they were saying after they interviewed us, they said, teaching is really a lesson in love. And the article that they wrote in Yediot Achronot, I didn't really know they were going to put it in the, in the center spread of the weekend Yediot Achronot. It was very nice to be famous. Was about how teaching is about love. And what I think is really interesting is that in the work that we're doing in professional learning, we could also say that it is a lesson in love. Yesterday, when the teachers were leaving the workshop that Kyle and Craig were doing, they said as they left that they could really see the light in the eyes of Kyle and Craig as they were talking about their work. This is really what we mean when we say a lesson in love, and I hope that the lesson that I'm bringing you from Ontario is also considered by you, and you can see that the work that we've done it from passion. And I think that professional learning is really is not staying. I don't know why. I will keep trying. I'll put it closer to me and hopefully it will keep working. We'll see. The lesson that we're learning from Ontario, in a way, the many lessons that we've learned on a certain level are lessons in love. Let's see about the lessons that I wanted to tell you about, because what we're really talking about and what I like to show everybody anytime that I do a presentation is that, in fact, this is a picture of me and this is my son who is today 23 years old. Okay? The little girl is my niece, and we were walking one day in near the Lake Ontario, and we saw this sign, and we had to take a photograph, and I show it to every group that I speak to, because it says that according to the United Nations, the Canadians are the happiest people in the world. No wonder. And I say that the reason that we're the happiest people in the world in Ontario, which is where we're, the province that we're from, I wanted you to see on the map, and Kyle and Craig will tell you exactly where they're from. But the reason we're the happiest people in the world, I think, is because we have had such a great adventure in our education system. For 15 years, and this is the period, and I really thank Eli for helping me set this up, because he gave you a lot of the information that I wanted to give you. For 15 years, what was happening is that the government of Ontario in a very explicit, very deliberate way, built a relationship with the teacher unions, working together with teachers and their unions to create an education system that was really working very well. And yesterday when I was talking with Eyal, he said to me, what do you mean by success and how did you measure the success? Well, I can tell you that between 2003 and 2018, our graduation rate went from 68% of our students graduating from high school to 87% in 2018. In a 15-year period, it's huge. The other thing that happened in that period of time is we saw on all our testing, and I'll talk about testing in a bit because it's the one area that Ellie and I don't agree on. I don't like testing, but it is true that we can look at our testing results and we can say to you, in that same period of time, we saw enormous gains in testing. We also saw a staggering narrowing of gaps between our highest achieving and our lowest achieving students. And we also saw an incredible recognition of Ontario as being one of the best places in the world for education because of what we were accomplishing. And my view, I don't care who would like to disagree with me, but my view is that a lot of that accomplishment came because we were, instead of working against each other, we were working together to achieve the things that we wanted to achieve. These were areas that we all could agree on. They were important things. And for me, the culminating piece of this work we did together was that in 2016, the government of Ontario created a regulation, which is like a law in a way, about collaborative professionalism. The notion of working together and collaborating together became so important that it became almost like a law for us in education, a rule that we live by. So it was a very interesting time, and the question is, what was happening? And Eli has made my job easy because he explained to you quite a lot about our situation in Ontario. Before I tell you exactly what we did and what we learned from what we did, this is some information you should know about Ontario, because I know sometimes people say, well, it's not like here. People think that Ontario is a very homogeneous place. No, it is very heterogeneous. As you can see, we have 40% of all the immigrants that come to Canada come to Ontario, and 40% of the population of all of Canada live in Ontario. So it's the most populated province of Ontario. We have a large population, and we have many of the immigrants that come to Canada end up in Ontario. I think it's interesting for you to know that of our 2 million students, which is about the same number as students you have, 29% of them are born outside of Canada. So you can imagine how many cultures, how many languages we have in our schools. This is another thing we're very proud of, but I think is quite similar to you. 95% of our students attend publicly funded schools. It's huge for us because in the United States, of course, that is not their reality, so this is a very important piece. The number of teachers, we had a little bit of a discussion about how to show you the number of teachers. When the government of Ontario says how many teachers they are, they use the number 126,000. We use 142 are the number of human being teachers. 126,000 is how many full-time equivalent teachers are in our system. So if you want to think about a system, you can think of the number 126,000. But in fact, if you think about how many human beings there are about 142,000. These are just the teachers in the public system, okay? We have about 5,000 schools. 4,000 of them are elementary schools. 900 about are high schools. These schools exist in 72 school districts. Kyle and Craig have come from one of those 72 school districts. And it's important to understand that 60 of those school districts are in English, 12 of them are in French. Okay, so we're dealing with two languages. Within the 60 that are in English, we also have some that are considered public and some that are considered Catholic, but all are publicly funded. Okay, so in our province, we were funding the Catholic schools. So far, so good. Let us turn, this is my only slide that has got any real detailed information on it. I wanted to spend just a little bit of time to explain to you what does professional learning look like in Ontario. And you'll notice I'm only talking about Ontario because in Canada, education is managed by the province, by the state, not by the whole country, okay? So by our provinces. The first thing that you can see over there is that we have a very strict system, a very regulated system of pre-service. You cannot become a teacher in Canada without going to university. We have a few exceptions for teachers of technical subjects who can come through a work environment, but almost all of our teachers do 4 years of university. After the 4 years of university, they must do 2 more years of education, of pedagogy, okay? You must do that at a university. We do not have teachers' colleges anymore. You must do it at university. In some cases, those 6 years can be combined together, 6 years that you can do partially your arts or your science degree at the same time as your education degree, but in the end, the amount of time is the same. It is 6 years. And some people manage to do the 2 years of education. It's 4 semesters. Some of our programs do that over a year and a half, but it's 4 full semesters. So I counted like 6 years of university. Okay, that is pre-service. Everybody must do that. You cannot teach in Ontario unless you have that. Second thing is what happens when you're in service. We have a system of additional qualifications that teachers can get. Those are very regulated courses. Each course is, I want to say 120 hours, but maybe it's 100 hours now, something like that. These are usually courses offered, again, by the university. In some cases, very interesting.
It's 130 for some reason.
No, maybe.
Okay.
Should we say you're right?
No.
Okay. Somewhere between 100 and 130 hours of, but it's regulated. You have to apply to the College of Teachers to get this accredited, and so the teachers are doing these courses. You can use those courses for additional salary, but not all teachers are doing them for additional salary because the level of our salary, it's only 4 levels. And then there's the question of experience. So that's how teachers' salaries go up, by the number of years you taught, and there are 4 levels. And most of our teachers are coming out of university. When they begin, they're already at level 3. So the number that are doing these courses to go up in salary is not huge, but many people are taking them to increase their learning. But they are voluntary. Nobody has to do them. You might have to do it if you want to teach in a specific subject. By the way, I should have said in our pre-service training, we do not train teachers to teach all grades or to teach all subjects. In the elementary, you would have primary and junior, so really from kindergarten to grade 3.
All the way to grade 6.
Sorry, all the way to grade 6. I had to stop and think. Kindergarten to grade 3 is primary, junior is from grade 4 to grade 6. So you would have 2 levels that you're trained to teach, or you would teach what is called the junior grades and the intermediate grades, so from grade 4 to grade 10, or you would teach what we call intermediate and senior, which is really from grade 7 to 12. 7 to 12. So you are trained, and if you're trained in the high school years, you're trained to teach 2 specific subjects. So Kyle and Craig, well, not so much. Craig is trained at the elementary level. He can teach all subjects. Kyle is trained at the secondary level, so he is teaching really math, and you probably have a second teachable.
Computer science, business, guidance.
Okay, he's done many additional qualifications. So instead of only having 2 when he graduated, he now has about 4 different qualifications because he wanted to teach different things. But I wanted just to say that the pre-service, you need to train in a specific age group, and you need to train basically in specific subject matter. Unless you're an elementary teacher, you're teaching in all areas. But I want to also say that the salary of our teachers is the same across. If you're an elementary teacher or secondary teacher, you get the same salary. The salary is dependent on your number of years of teaching and your qualifications. Sorry, I don't want to take too long on this. The final one that's there is that there's a lot of formal and informal learning, lots of it in lots of different formats, and you can take it on a voluntary level. There is some that is required by the school board. We have 5 days per year that you must do in the school, but that is during the school day, and it's organized by the school district. Okay, so let's tell the story now. The story is really that in the end of the 1990s, we had a very negative relationship with our government. And I like this picture very much because it's a picture of what happened during the First World War. So, in the first Christmas of the First World War, in 1914, it's Christmas 1914, it was a very special thing because the British soldiers in the trenches and the German soldiers in the trenches came out of their trenches and they shook hands with each other. In fact, there are some reenactments that you can find of this where they show that they even played soccer together, they interacted with each other. It was a very special moment. And for me, at the end of the 1990s, actually in 2003, when our new government was elected, this was the situation that we had, because we hated our government, we hated our ministry. They were not talking with us and not really dealing well with us. The Ministry of Education at the time had introduced a system of testing teachers and a system of mandatory professional learning. You were required to do 14 courses every 5 years, otherwise you would lose your certificate. And guess what we did? Nothing. All of the professional learning that we had always been doing in Ontario came to a complete standstill, because the teachers, especially through our union, said, we are not prepared to do learning that is not meaningful to us and has no value to us. We are not prepared to do learning that we're checking off on a list that we did it. We are only willing to do learning that is meaningful. So, from this situation of a terrible war between the teachers and the government, suddenly we had a new government. And like a Christmas gift for the teachers, in 2003, the first thing that the new government did was they cancelled the mandatory professional learning program. Just like that, cancelled. What they also did was they decided, like Ellie said, to focus in on 3 main goals that they knew we could all agree on. As he said, anything that was something we were fighting over, we took off the table. The 3 goals: we wanted to improve the outcomes of the students, the achievement outcomes of the students. We wanted to increase the public's confidence in what was happening in our schools. And we wanted to narrow the gaps between our highest and lowest performing students. Those were the 3 goals that we sat down and we agreed on. In addition to these 3 broad goals, the government, now that they cancelled mandatory professional learning, they said we have to come up with what are teachers actually going to do, because the public wants to know that you're doing something and we want to know that you're doing something. How are we going to do it? And they did something very special. 2 things. First of all, they created a working table where we could come together to talk about what really mattered for teachers in professional learning, in particular for experienced teachers, okay? Because we were in the process of introducing an induction program for beginning teachers. We felt that that would take care of the needs of beginning teachers. But what about your experienced teachers who come to a point where they don't feel like teaching anymore? They don't feel inspired by their teaching. How can we make professional learning that is meaningful for them and that will help to carry them forward? And how can we create teacher leaders? And how can we learn from each other? So this was a lot of the thinking that was in our mind at the time. By the way, we also had to come up with some ideas about how we were going to do the performance appraisal. And we also, at that table where we were sitting together, we together discovered and developed the professional evaluation of teachers. It was really fantastic. And after some period of time, I can tell you, I was telling them last night at the dinner table that the man that I was working with at the Ministry of Education, I hated him. I didn't want to speak to him. I hated him so much because he was always the person who was talking to me about mandatory professional learning. Now we come to the table, we roll up our sleeves, we start to work together, and it was like I fell in love with him. We were together building what would be the next steps of professional learning for teachers. And in fact, we came to a point where I became known as the mother of the program that we developed, and he became the father of the program. Be'emet, it was like a true love story that went from not being able to talk to each other to really being able to work together. The gift that the government gave us, apart from coming up with these, and I have to say they were very explicit. They didn't just, say we're going to come and we're going to make peace with the teachers. They were really saying to us, we're going to do it, and here is proof of how we're going to do it. We are proving to you we're going to create peace with you because we're not going to say negative things anymore about the teachers. We're canceling the teacher mandatory learning. We're giving you the space to come together for you to speak to us about what will matter. And they gave us money. In the first year, they gave us $23 million. And when I say they gave us, I'm saying they gave to the teacher unions $23 million to do professional learning. Just for us to do professional learning for teachers, by teachers. And they enabled us to really stop for a moment to think about what would really make the difference. What does professional learning that is meaningful for teachers, what does it look like? What would we do in order to allow teachers to take control of their own learning? And how would that be expressed? Like, what would teachers do if we let them take control of their own learning, of the learning that they're doing with their colleagues? What would it look like? The other thing that was really good for us is that we had this idea of the butterfly principle. I will come back to it in a little bit later in my presentation. But we knew that in classrooms across Ontario, every single day there were miracles happening in the classrooms. And what would happen in those miracles that the teacher was doing in his or her own classroom is the teacher in the next door classroom knew nothing about what I was doing, let's say, in my classroom. The teacher in the next school definitely didn't know about it. The teacher in the rest of my school district didn't know. And heaven forbid, in across Ontario, nobody knew what I was doing. So because we believed firmly that teachers were doing these miracles, we were trying to sit down and think about how can we share these miracles? How can we bring teachers to learn out loud and to share in a very deliberative way the learning that they're doing? Okay? So this is what I call the butterfly principle, and I will come back to it later to explain to you why it's so important. So the result of that is that we started to build a program that would enable us to do these things. We were looking really for, it's so funny, I'm advancing here so I can see my slides, my own notes, but not advancing on top. So we were looking for a way to really make it porachat, right? Like, it's perach porachat. What did you say to me last night? Tzomech tzomach. Tzemach tzomach. Oh, tzemach tzomeach. Okay, beseder. So there you go. It's a question of how do we make these ideas that we were thinking about, how to make professional learning, self-directed learning for teachers in a way that was meaningful for teachers. How were we going to allow teachers to share what they were learning with each other and learn what they're doing out loud, to speak about it a lot? And how would this bring us to developing teacher leadership? Because what we wanted very much is we wanted teachers to be able to stay in their classrooms if they wanted to. It's very nice for a teacher to become a principal. It's very nice for a principal to become, you know, the head of an area or whatever you want. But there are some teachers who are doing fantastic things, and you want them to be able to advance in their career while they stay in the classroom. It was very important to us. So really, we developed a program called the Teacher Learning and Leadership Program. It was just one of many things that we did to enable that. How much? 7. Oh my God. Okay. So we developed this program. We were really focusing on developing those goals. We had 3 goals, and the end result of developing this program and really focusing on professional learning that was informed by research and really building on what teachers know and etc., we found that we had results that went way beyond what we thought we were going to have. We had researchers and people coming and telling us, famous people like Anne Lieberman, Carol Campbell, Andy Hargraves, telling us that they had not seen a program like this ever in their lives. I need to say that the Keren HaYozmot, your program, is very close to what the principles that we built our program on. The incredible thing that happened through this program is that we developed an understanding of our teachers and who our teachers were and what they were doing, and we realized that they were superstars. If not for this program of really encouraging and allowing teachers to do the work and then to share what they were doing in a very loud way, in an often way, how do you say it, a frequent way, I would not even know about Craig and Kyle's work. And they would not have maybe known that they had the capacity to develop into teacher leaders. So I could give you many examples there. It's not just that Craig and Kyle are special teachers. We have many, many teachers, quiet teachers that you would never have known about. Teachers who are living in the far north, you would never have known what they were doing. And because we were encouraging them to talk about what they were doing and to learn in this way, they became well known. So I might not do it in 7 minutes, but I'm going to now go through with you 8 lessons that we learned from the work that we did. Very quickly. These are the important things that we learned by doing it the way we did it. The first thing that we learned is that when policymakers collaborate with the organized teaching profession, it is likely to produce incredible learning, okay? You build something together. In order for this to work, it is very important that the policymakers and the teachers' unions or whoever is representing the teachers agree on what are the things that are important for teacher professional learning. If you don't have that beginning point of agreement of what counts for them and for us, it's not going to work. That's the first thing. The second thing that I cannot emphasize enough is the importance of trust. Okay? I know you want to say to me, we cannot build trust in our system. I can tell you when we began in 2003, I would have said to you, it is impossible for us to build trust in our system. To build trust, it requires courage. It takes doing a bold initiative is important to the teachers. That will signal to the teachers from today we are not doing business as usual, we're doing it differently. I don't want to tell you what that is. You can think about what it is. I think it's not so hard to ask your teachers what really matters and what would make their life better. You make a big move and you start to build the trust. Then the teachers know and the teachers' unions know this is a new way of doing business, and we're going forward. I took a quote from Stephen Covey. He says, change moves at the speed of trust. Change moves at the speed of trust. There's nothing more true. I can tell you, if you don't establish trust, Ellie, if you don't, on this we agree, if you don't establish trust, there will be no change. And in a trusting relationship, the system leaders have to believe in the capacity of the teachers, and the teachers have to believe in their own capacity, okay? That they can be leaders and they can lead the change. And you have to be explicit about the cultivation of trust, and you have to be explicit about maintaining the trust. Because trust takes a long time to build, it takes a second to break. So these are very important concepts. The third lesson, I know it's a funny picture, but the choice and the voice of the teachers, just like we talk about the choice and the voice of students, the choice and the voice of teachers is very important. If you don't give teachers control over choosing what they're learning, we can all go home today, okay? Because teachers at different stages of their career or in different environments will know what they most need to learn. They have to have a voice in choosing what they do and how they do it, when they do it. This is Sherlock Holmes, of course, and it's a very important point. This is the fourth lesson, and I have 8 lessons, but we learned that research really matters. Research really matters. With a good research structure, you can tell the story of your success. First of all, you can use the research to help you fine-tune what is working and what is not working. We were very responsive to what our research was showing us. If the research showed us that this direction was good, we went further in this direction. If the research showed us it was a bad direction, we stopped it. So first of all, it shows you how to fine-tune what you're doing and if what you're doing is correct. Second of all, it helps you tell your story aloud and often that you're doing something that is successful. And the third thing is that it makes it impossible for whoever your funder is, if it's the government or if it's a foundation, they cannot easily cancel the funding because the evidence is so clear that what you're doing is working. So it's very important. We had research all the way through and we knew it would be very important. The next lesson is that success is very contagious, more than coronavirus. These are some teachers in the far north. They live in a town where there is no gas station. I think there's one high school, there's maybe something that you could call a supermarket, not really. Nobody would have known what they were doing. She, the second teacher, is an art teacher. She is exchanging with Japan. She's been invited to many different places. We pay attention to what she's doing. She's teaching art in a way I've never seen taught. Never would we know about her work, but because she was doing it, other people learned about it and they got excited. The other thing about success being contagious is in the same school. When Kyle was doing a project, then Craig heard Kyle was doing a project. He wanted to do a project. Then another teacher in the school wanted to do a project. Then teachers in the next school wanted to do a project. Everybody got very excited about the work that they were doing. The success is because we described them in a very clear way. I used the example last night when I was talking with Ellie. We have one teacher who I had hoped would come here, a math teacher. She was teaching students at grade 9, very weak math students from a poor socioeconomic background. When she began her work, only 17%, were meeting the provincial standard in math. By the time she finished her work 3 years, well, she never finished her work, but 3 years later when she was looking at the results, 71% of those students were reaching the provincial standard. It's huge. When the schools learned that that's what was happening, they wanted to learn from her. Everybody wanted to learn from her. She has gone to Norway, she has gone to many places to talk about, right across Ontario, of course, and Canada, to talk about what she's doing. She presents with us at conferences. So, lesson number 6, you're still with me, Mika. You're going to tolerate 3 more lessons. Innovation, poor translator because I'm going very fast now. Innovation, if you want to cultivate innovation, it takes space and you have to give it space. If you want innovation, you have to make the environment, the ecosystem in which innovation can happen. And it is not so easy to do, but you have to be thinking about it all the time. You need specific structures that drive and deepen the work. And those could be some online things, but also face-to-face I find is very important. And the piece that is really interesting is that as you cultivate teacher leadership, we found a huge impact on the principals. We had principals who told us that their careers were completely rejuvenated. They were depressed before, and then suddenly they had teachers in their school doing this kind of very energetic learning, and it changed everything for even our principals, even though they were not the subjects of the work that we were doing. By the way, our principals are not in the union. So they're sitting a little bit on the outside. It made a huge impact. And I told you I would come back to the butterfly effect. So not only when Andy Hargraves was talking about innovation in Ontario schools, he kept talking about our projects and how all the examples of innovation he saw were coming from our projects. But the image that I leave you with on this topic is if you think about a chrysalis, you know what it is? Before the butterfly, it's a chrysalis. Imagine if you put a chrysalis into a matchbox. At the time that it was time for the butterfly to come out, if the chrysalis is in a matchbox that is the size of the chrysalis, there is no space for the wings to open. And this is what you have to think about, is how you make space for the wings of the teachers to really open. Finally, I love this picture. It's about a little bit what you were talking about earlier, was about flipping the system. You are starting from the bottom up to make sure that the drive for the teacher learning is coming from the teachers upwards, not a top-down approach. And what you gain from that is incredible. It's not easy to do. Systems don't like it so much because it does take a lot of trust, but it makes a huge difference. And Lieberman tells us it's not very common to find systems that actually can do this in a real way, but if you can do it, it's for us, it made all the difference. And I couldn't have the last lesson without Einstein. And this is a hard one, but we learned a lesson that education systems that hope to promote innovation must resist control and must resist a one-size-fits-all approach. When we were having a lot of success with our approach, what the government then said to us is, everybody must do this now. No, not everybody needs to do professional learning communities. Not everybody needs to do this exact approach. You need to still allow voice and choice. This is not for everybody. Other teachers can find a better way for them that works well for them. The reason I have the picture of Einstein is because Einstein is famous to have said, not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts. It's a very important thing, and it's really a tendency by decision makers, because you want to show that it's working, that you want to somehow control it. I think there are ways to find ways to show what is working without taking too much control over it and allowing the organic blooming of the initiative. So this is something that we have, all three of us, really been able to experience, because we not only did we go in many places across Ontario and we saw what was happening, brilliant things that the teachers were doing, but we were lucky enough to be invited to Norway. We had a project with Norway, and now we have come to Israel. I told you earlier I have been to many different jurisdictions, and what I can say about our time here in Israel is exactly what our colleague Leanne Oliver said over here. You know that for astronauts, when they go to space and they see from space the Earth, they come back and they say, we think differently about the Earth. So you have to go to the moon in order to see your own place differently. And that's how it has been for us coming here to work with Keren HaYozmot, and how it is as you step away from what it is you're doing immediately and you look at it. So, Zeu, that's everything. Like a race. Like a race. Like a race.